Ian, we have missed you, and we're really glad you're back. Let's give him another hand. And we have a special surprise for later.
I'm definitely not that tall. So let me put my little short thing here. So welcome everyone. I'm so blessed to be having the opportunity to speak on the Beatitudes, to speak on something that I love and cherish. Anything that came from Jesus is truly a humbling experience to be able to share. For Jesus is a master, and he is a way shower. And he lived by example, he taught by example, and we can continue to live our own lives as his example. So my name is Barbara Hess. I am a licensed Unity teacher here at Unity of Richmond. I'm very blessed to be a teacher. I was told from a young age, what you want to know, you need to teach. So what better things to teach than things that are of the truth and nature of God? Because when you teach from the nature of God, you understand that you are that nature, and you live your life that way. So that's truly a blessing also. And Fred, I'm very blessed that my husband's platforming with us. He is also going to become a licensed Unity teacher. We've been part of this congregation for 28 years. So we call you home. You're all our family, whether we've met you one time or 20. Earlier at the earlier service, we had our two daughters who also came and joined us. They didn't think they could hear me twice. I do that enough at home, so I didn't need to repeat myself to them again. And then, as always, we have our son, Jamie, who's here in spirit. So we're very blessed to be part of this community. So with that, I am always, once again, humbled with the Beatitudes. And there's so much to the Beatitudes that is very important for me to remember and a way to live my life. The Beatitudes is the introduction to the Sermon on the Mount. And the Sermon on the Mount is the only piece of teaching that Jesus gave that was completely documented. So this was a sermon that he documented. It's in the book of Matthew. And whenever, I know I've been told if I want to learn something, I learn it from the Master. So this is something he taught, he wrote down. And the Beatitudes, people say it is an 8-verse prose, so it's a poem. And that the Beatitudes sum up all of Jesus' teachings. Now, Jesus taught the Beatitudes from a spiritual perspective. So he wasn't trying to teach dogma. He wasn't trying to teach anything specific. He knew that there were, and he really kind of went against the grain that was happening at the time. If you look in the community that Jesus came to, they were very rule-oriented. They followed rules. They had things they were supposed to do on a daily basis in order to be connected with God. And he loved being Jewish. He didn't condemn any of that. But he said that there's something more. So he was there to transform the way you could experience God, not to conform. And that reminds me of our vision statement here at the church. We're transformed lives transforming the world. And whenever I hear the word transform, to me that means there's a structural change. So that means there's something that has to shift within. So Jesus was showing us an example of if you want anything different in your life, it has to start within. And so he was in this nature, it was in this nature that he taught. He also knew that, and as we study here in Unity, that the mind is a very important part of who we are. We're more than our body. We are more than our mind. But the mind, as defined in the Revealing Word and from a metaphysical perspective, is the meeting place with God. How powerful. Our mind is the meeting place of God. And the mind has a very unique feature that our body doesn't have. Our mind can direct its attention outside, and it can direct its attention inside. So it's pivotal. So I can either choose to listen and see everything from the world to get my information, or I can go to that place of silence, that communion with God, that divinity. to grow my own capacity. You see, every time I sit in meditation, I know that I have an experience of God. I don't have to judge it. I don't have to change it. If I sit with the intention of meditating, I have an experience of God. The Bible tells us this in many ways. It says, knock and the door will open. It didn't say you had to knock 10 times. And it didn't say you had to bust the door open. It said knock. So all I have to do is take one step towards Spirit, one step towards God, and God opens the door 1,000 times back. But I do have to be willing to take that step. And so the Beatitudes is a map of your mental state. It's a guideline. Jesus knew that if you were right in your mind, you would be right in every affair of your life. So it's a map of how to create a mental state of receptivity, of understanding, a field ripe for the taking in of God's Spirit. He also knew that, as we often do today, people of that time, they would read the Bible, they would study, they would listen. They did many, many things. They followed many rules. And so even we can read, we can study, we can talk to our friends, we can go to a class, we can do all kinds of things. But he was trying to wean us even from our spiritual development, from it having to come from out here. He was allowing us to wean our heart to the inside. Because no matter how much I read, no matter how much I study, if I do not spend the time in relationship with God, I cannot have the understanding. See, understanding is different from intellect. Understanding is having an experience. And the experience only comes when you spend time in that space of awareness, that space of truth from which God resides. I've mentioned before that the Beatitudes are transforming. The Beatitudes open with the word blessed. And so what I want us to do today is I'm going to kind of bring up some language and some of the ways that people use the words in Jesus' time. Words can mean different things over time. I mean, what do kids say now? Something's sick, and that's really good. But in the past, if we would have heard that, that wasn't really good. So words can change their connotation, and it's the same thing. Our minds might think something, but is that really the way that we were interpreting it? So in the Beatitudes, it starts with blessed. And let me tell you some definitions of what blessed meant. It's to confer prosperity upon. That means there's an abundance, plenty for everyone. To enrich, to make supremely happy. Not just happy, supremely. The blessedness and the bliss of heaven. So what this is saying is that when you follow the Beatitudes, when you live these principles and not just think about them, you live in the bliss of heaven. And that's a right now moment. It's not when you die. It's not if you do these things for a certain length of time. It means that every time you do, you can live in heaven. And when we look at what heaven is, it's pure harmony. It's that space of divine understanding. It's the space where you rest in who your true nature is in the presence of God. So to begin with, every time you're blessed. What a gift. It is a way for, some people say it's the directions for the growth of the soul. It's how we grow our soul. Just like when we go on a trip, we have a map. Well, the Beatitudes is an internal guidepost. It's not a map to how to get there. It's a map how to anchor in the divinity of who we are. For we are all Christ consciousness. We're all 100% substance of God. Now, there can be a lot of layers that we have to get through to let that shine through, but we all have it. We don't have to get it. We already are. So it's a matter of how do you live it, transform it, and stay there. The Bible, we often talk about the Bible. Myrtle and Charles Fillmore were the founders of Unity, and they loved the Bible. They understood the Bible. They studied the Bible. They spoke from the Bible because they understood that the Bible was from a metaphysical perspective. And what that means is beyond physical. It means that there's a spiritual realm. And everything that Jesus taught and everything he said allowed us to go into spirit. So this morning we've already had a few things. Elsie spoke on the Beatitudes when she was talking about gratitude. Fred did this wonderful meditation about going into the I am and spending some time inside. The song by Eon, Blowing in the Wind is spirit. Spirit's everywhere. We stated that as our truth. God is everywhere present. So that means that you, every cell of your being, every cell of your brain, your mind, your body, your community, every person, everything is the substance of God. So when you start living from that state where everything is of spirit, then you live in harmony. You start creating for your own self this place of beingness. The other thing that's beautiful about the Bible, and when you spend some time really getting to know it from not a literal perspective, but from the spiritual map that it is that there's things there for everyone. Jesus taught us the prayer, the Lord's Prayer. Now, that wasn't something that he taught, once again, to be said rotely. He was teaching it for us to learn. And so one of the things it says, give us this day our daily bread. Now, for some people, bread might mean bread. I'm hungry. God will give me food. I know I will get food today. And that's very important. And then some people might say, it's for everything I need in my life. It's the car, it's the job, it's my relationship. But see, both of those were still staying out here in the world. Good place to be, knowing that God provides. But we can also take that bread that every day I have the opportunity to be joined, to union, to merge into the presence of God. That I have the ability to change my infrastructure inside so that my Christ consciousness, my divinity can ooze from every pore of my body. So these states of being that Jesus is talking about in the Beatitudes, it's not about the state itself. It's about recognizing that Spirit's there 100% no matter wherever you are. That wherever you are, there's an accepting, loving grace that can flow in and through you. And that's the gift of the Beatitudes. One of the things that I love is the way that the Beatitudes start out, and I'm going to read that to you. And seeing the multitudes, he went up into the mountain. And when he was set, his disciples came unto him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying. Now, oftentimes, when you have a leading sentence, you just kind of speed over it to try to get to the meat. There is so much packed in that statement. First of all, it says that Jesus went up to a mountain. Now, if we were to look at that metaphysically, mountain does represent a higher state of consciousness, a higher way of thinking, a way that you're more in tune to, it is not I, but the Father that does the work. And that's the space that Jesus moved and had his greatest being in. But you also say that he went away from the multitudes. You see, Jesus knew that people were at different levels of understanding and that the disciples were following him. So they were already resonating. They already were prayed up. They were already at a place of receptivity that they could understand his teachings at a deeper level. The disciples were chosen and they said they walked away from what they were doing. It doesn't mean you have to walk away from what you're doing, but you prioritize God first. And each of these disciples did that. They said, you are my master, Jesus. You are phenomenal. I'm going to learn from you. I'm going to study with you. I'm going to go where you are because I resonate. There's the divinity in me sees the divinity in you. Even if they didn't know that at the time, there's something that they knew they could get from him. And so Jesus had special time and attention, just as we do when we spend that time. Also, the disciples were prayed up. They had a disciplined practice. Anytime you go, if you're going to be an athlete, you discipline yourself. If you're going to be showing your divinity, you discipline yourself. It's not something that just comes. You spend time anchored in divine nature. So they had a daily prayer and meditation practice. Now, I know I've had daily prayer and meditation practices in my life, and then I haven't. And then I have, and then I haven't. It's hard to keep up with it sometimes. But I'll tell you, when I do, I come from a different place. I stay in a different place. And when I don't, people piss me off. I get annoyed. I want to fix people. I come from that place, if you would only do this, I'd be okay. Same thing. Then I go back to praying again. Same person. I see them a different way. So that's not something that changed out here. It was all in my perspective. It was all in how much time am I going to spend with Spirit or spend thinking that I'm all that and I can do it on my own. So we're taught from the very beginning that in order to receive, you have to be open and willing to have this humbleness, this spirit of receptivity. And that's what his disciples had. Now, if you look in your bulletin, I do have the Beatitudes on a purple sheet. You can take it out and look at it as you go. But what I really encourage you to do is to take it home so that you can have a new relationship with these. Now, the Beatitudes are said Beatitudes, but it's also be attitudes because it's a state of being. I know every one of you can tell me what you do on a daily basis. But are you being when you do? And that's what the Beatitudes are about. It's about bringing that spirit of being into every aspect of your life. Jesus didn't say you have to do it this way. He didn't dictate. He didn't say any of that. But he said these are mental states of being that when you do, you're blessed. And when you're blessed, you live in your own divinity and in that state of perfect harmony of heaven. So it's a guideline. It's map post. The first beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So it gives us a direction and then the promise, the kingdom of heaven. Once again, the kingdom of heaven isn't something we're going to get to. It's that state of pure harmony that we have 100% with us 100% of the time. Just where are you looking? So go in. To be poor in spirit, oftentimes that can be very misunderstood. So what does it mean to be poor in spirit? And if you look at what Jesus was saying at the time and metaphysically, it means to be God-centered. It means when I wake up in the morning, I say, thank you, God. How can I live my day today, God? It means that I spend time every morning, prayer and meditation and centering myself so that I show up in God consciousness. So I show up divine. Poor in spirit means that I don't think about what little Barbara wants to do all the time. It's stepping away from looking at how do I have to deal with all of this to how can I be in all of this? How can I be and how can I show up? It comes from a bit of spiritual understanding. You become non-attached to the world and your physical needs and super concentrated in your God self. You still function in the world. And all those things come to you. So it's not about saying, I don't want to be. It's about how can you be while you're in the presence of doing. And then the next beatitude is, blessed are they that mourn, for they shall be comforted. Now this can come from two different perspectives. One can be, when you pray, and then your heart yearns for a little bit more. Or when you come to a class and you yearn for something more? Or you change churches? Or you're in a relationship and you decide that you really want to start praying together? What are you yearning for? You're yearning for a deeper experience of God. And so when you mourn, it's almost like a spiritual melancholy. You're starting to recognize that there is unity, that everyone's divine, and you want to stay in that space. So one way you can interpret the mourning is that when you feel the separation from God and you don't want that to happen anymore. So you grow your capacity. You grow your ability to stay anchored in your own divinity. And that's a very sweet melancholy, and it's a very deep pull that helps you stay committed to your practice. There's another way you can look at this too. You can pray and then hold on to your resentments, show up at work thinking that if the people you work with would change a little bit, work would go better. I'm smart enough, so if they do what I say, it's going to be better. You can stay pissed off at your husband so that when you go home, you don't even want to see him. And you tell him what he needs to be doing so that the house looks better. You can say, you know what? I'm okay. I'm not upset with so-and-so. And if they forgive, if they ask for forgiveness, I'll forgive them. And you keep doing that over and over and over again. I'm going to exercise tomorrow. Today I just need to sit, and someone else needs to do for me. And then what happens? You hit the bottom. Your life's not going very good. You stay kind of pissed off. You never can get back to center. And so that's a form of mourning too. You see, God, we are so blessed with Spirit. Spirit says you can either step into God consciousness and be there 100%, or you can run your own life and hit a wall, and hit a wall, and hit a wall, and then turn it around. You can do it either way you want to. But both can lead you back into a practice that helps you to stay anchored in your divinity. See, Spirit's not going to pick for you. You can do it either way. But there's a grace moment in that. Just like the reading said on gratitude, if the things get tough, stay anchored. And look at that, not from the world did this to me, but how can I show up? How can I be throughout what I'm doing? Then we go to blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. So one of the words here is the earth. And when you're talking about things, once again, from a metaphysical perspective, the earth is everything. It's not just this world that we live in. It's everything that we come across in our life. It's the way we live our life. It's the people we interact with. It's everything that's within on our horizon. So how can we inherit the earth? That means that we have some dominion over the way we interact with the world, with what we create. And what does it mean to be meek? Meek doesn't mean weak. Meek doesn't mean timid. Jesus was very meek. And I don't think anyone can say that he was a timid representative in this world. Meek means to know that it's not I, but the Father that does the work. Meek is to know that there is a power greater than myself that does more than I do. Meek is to know that I can anchor in that divinity anytime I want to. To be meek is when you wake up and you want to fall on your knees and thank God for the morning. It's when you're doing anything in your life and you pause and you say, thank you, God. Help me, God. I love God. Meek is when you spend more time thinking about Jesus than you do the latest movie you just saw. Meek is when you quit trying to make your relationship support you and you start supporting the relationship. And it's when you start giving because you love to give, not because you want something back. So Jesus represented that in such a lovely way. It's a humble soul. It opens you up to grace. Blessed are they that hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled. So another way to say righteousness is right thinking. And so right thinking, once again, goes to keeping the focus on me. How do I interact with the world? What do I have to offer? How can I live? You know, it also means that you're willing to do what it takes to shift and change. I know I've done this many times in my life where I've said a prayer, I mean the prayer, I want the prayer, but I don't believe the prayer. You see, it all has to be congruent. Like, for instance, if you're not feeling good, okay, and let's say that Fred and I have this pattern that I'm not feeling good. He makes me soup, and he starts doing chores around the house, and then other people say, "Oh, Barbara, are you feeling better?" See, I like that. I'm getting a little attention. I'm getting what I need. So I'm willing to say I'm going to be healthy 100% and give all that up. I'm willing to turn anything around so that I can stay in the truth of who I am, that I'm a whole, healthy being. Now, he can continue to make soup for me, but I'm not manipulating him to do that. There's a difference, and you know when you do it. You have an awareness of when you're getting help or when you're depending upon it. Another way that you can look at this is thirst and hunger. You know, often when you start seeking a different way of being, when you start seeking a different church, you start going to a different class, you start learning, you know, you can go to a yoga group, you can go to different meditation groups, you can go to different chanting groups. You're thirsting. You know there's something out there that's a little bit different. So you've got the thirst. Thirst can be a very intellectual thing. But then you hunger. And when you hunger, you're wanting to delve into it. You're wanting what Jesus demonstrated. You're wanting that depth of spirituality that can be expressed in any one person. You're not going out there and saying, "Oh, they got it, but I can't." You know you can do it. You hunger for that satisfaction to feel that inner yearning. And you know that that yearning is a yearning for God. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. And many of us know what mercy is. And there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. And empathy is more in the realms of mercy. It's more, once again, recognizing that God is in every situation. Jesus showed us this in such a powerful way when on the cross he said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." He didn't say, "Oh my gosh, don't let them get into heaven." He didn't say, "Well, they're naughty, you know, I'm not going to look at them." He said, "Forgive them." He didn't say what they did was okay. It wasn't a very good situation to be in. He recognized that, but he said they didn't know what they were doing. And that's a place that we get to, especially if you have forgiveness work to do. If you feel like you've ever been harmed by someone. And you have been harmed. You have. I mean, that's a reality. But you come to that space of forgiveness where you see that there is divine, they are divine also. But they're not operating from a very high level of divinity. So you can have boundaries there, but you can be aware and forgive them because they aren't able to function from a different level of being. I know there's times in my life that I've lashed out at people and I've said things I didn't need to say, and that was where I needed to be at the time. But as my awareness grows, I need to make an amends. So it's kind of like you can be at radio station 87 and you want to get to 103. Sometimes you get to 91 first. And so every morning I will open myself up with prayer and meditation. It's the way I anchor my day. I spend that time in spirit. And I spend time throughout the day. Thy will not mine be done. Pausing. And then at night I can review my day. You see, this is being merciful. I review my day, and where I feel like I was off mark, who do I need to pay an amends to? How do I need to rethink? Oh, I was very nice talking with Becky today, but the whole time I was talking to her, she was annoying me. And I was focused more on the annoyance than who she was and what she's trying to do. So that's the merciful, and that's how you direct it back to yourself. It's not being mercy here. Once again, it's being mercy with where you're coming from. I love blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. You know, there's so many layers and layers and layers of transformation we can go through with our heart. If you've ever prayed, you know, when I was little, the first time I prayed, I felt something. So I knew there was something greater than me. But as I've grown my capacity to sit in the presence of God, my heart opens in such a more magnificent way. And the pure in heart, you go through layers and layers and openings and openings. You know, there's many times that I know early on, I had some things that weren't very comfortable for me, and so I built a wall. I was like, I ain't going to do this. Well, I tell you, have a young child, and they'll open your heart. You know, after I had my first child, I knew I wasn't going to be able to stay guarded. And so I started taking some of the layers, doing some of my own work. Blessed are the pure in heart, because there's a transparency that you get to with your heart, that you stay so open and so transparent that you can't help but see the divine. You can't help but walk divine. You can't stop it from flowing. And that's where they're saying, blessed are the pure in heart. And every time you do your practice, every time you study, every time you sit in the silence, you're transforming your heart. I love the movie Avatar. You know, Avatar was based on the Beatitudes, if anyone saw Avatar. And one of the things they said in there is, I see you. See, what they were saying is, I see the purity of your heart. I see you being. I see your spirit. And those are the eyes of a pure heart. When you see, and all you see is the scintillating grace and love of divinity operating and flowing through each person. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. What a promise. So when you're a child of something, you're made of the same substance. You know, when you have a physical child, they're part of the mother and father. When you're the child of God, it's claiming that you are the substance of spirit. You are everything that God is, 100%. And one of the first things that happens when you start praying and meditating is, and I hear people say this to me all the time, there's a peace. It was so sweet. All my worries went away. There's a peace. So it's not, once again, blessed are the peacemakers that go out and try to make the world be peaceful. It's staying anchored in that state of peace. And when you have that peace, when you live in that peace, then if you step into your family and there's this harmony, you're bringing God into the situation. If you're having conflicts at work, and you understand and you live in that peace of being, you bring peace into the work setting. You're bringing God there. We had two great mentors in our world of late, Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Why do people talk about them so much? They still talk about these guys. They were peacemakers. They lived and breathed and prayed peace. And they didn't do it because they were trying to get somewhere. They knew that there was this understanding. They saw the divinity. They weren't trying to stop someone. They were trying to uplift that all of us were equal. They didn't want someone beat down. They wanted the union. And both of these men cried when someone on either side was harmed, because they knew that that wasn't the way to do. And I know one of the great things that Gandhi said, they said, but we could do this quicker if we put a little oomph behind it, if we knocked a few of them in their heads. And his answer was, then who would be guiding us? What is the heart of the person that would be guiding us if we put a little oomph into what we were doing? Beautiful piece with both of those men. Blessed are they who have been persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, when I first heard this, I thought, oh, I've got to be a martyr now. I have to go out there and stand on the corner and let everybody know I believe in God. Let somebody beat me down. That once again, that's going to the external. It's about changing your habit. It's about changing your way of being so that you're in line, in perfect alignment with who you truly are. It means instead of saying, I'm going to take care of this part of my life, I'm going to stay resentful over there. No, that's an old habit. That's a habit that needs to be changed. That's an area I might need to do forgiveness. It's about when I go home and I'm tired, can I spend some time nurturing my body instead of eating 20 cookies? Because the sugar will give me a little quick high or help me out. It's about talking to someone in a relationship instead of getting drunk over it. It's about taking care of my body and my mind and my spirit in such a way that I'm changing my habits. I'm changing my way of thinking. And that I'm willing to do that. And that if I'm with a group of friends or something that says, oh, come on, man, you don't need to meditate this morning. Let's go out. Let's have an early breakfast. I wake up earlier. I can still do breakfast with them, but I can get up earlier. I don't change my practices. I don't change the way I'm going to be. I don't change the way I relate to God. It will deepen, but I'm not succumbing to that external need. When someone comes up to me and says, I had a great example of both of these things. A good friend of my son's group was killed in a car accident this past week, age 24. Everybody was saying how awful it was, how bad it was. And I anchored it in prayer. I didn't have an opinion. Is it tragic at the moment? It is. But did I see the grace flowing through it? Now, this mother had asked me if I could support her a little bit. So I did. The first time when there was the visitation, I stood behind her. And she would look at me and she goes, this sucks. I said, sure it does. This isn't fair. Of course it's not. I hate this. Of course you do. Is it okay? She says, what do you think I'm thinking? I said, right now you're probably as angry at God you don't even want him here. She goes, exactly. Is it okay if I kick him out? Of course it is. And then she said, but at some point I'm going to accept and really get to know God more. And I said, of course you will. So you see, it wasn't feeding into, of course, all of those things are true. But I didn't have to buy into any of it. Because there will be a time of peace and resolution. And there always is. So Jesus blessed us with the Beatitudes. He blessed us with knowing that we are beings. And when we're in the state of our being, we can do anything. And that there's not any point that you get it. He didn't say to the disciples, when you get here, you're done. He knew that when you get there, you know it. And then you live in the state of I am. I am that. And you're living your divinity. So once again, I just want to state that the Beatitudes is a map of mental states of being. We have the capacity to focus always on the external or focus on the internal. We have the capacity to blame or the capacity to see the divinity. And we have the capacity to live our life really, really hurriedly and have maybe 1 or 2 minutes that we can pause and go, thank you, God. Or we have the capacity to dwell in that space and grow our capacity through our daily practice of prayer and meditation. But this is the roadmap for our internal journey to Christ consciousness. It's the map of our soul. It's the directions and what to do. So my hope and trust with what I'm going to do, and I hope all of you do, is that you continue to live these Beatitudes. You continue to develop your relationship with them. You don't just know you're blessed, you understand you're blessed. And you live through that state of blessedness. And in that, you see the divinity. Because there's nothing greater for me right now than to sit out and see all of you people. Because all of you are the face of God. All of you are allowing your mind to meet God mind right where you are. And so there's a reverence, there's a joy, and there's a knowing that as I continue to transform, this whole community is there, and we all transform together. And through that transformation, my world will change because I come from a place of deeper awareness, deeper understanding, and truly understand the 100 present omnipotence, omnipower, omnipresence of God. And for that, I'm so grateful. So namaste. And so is there anyone here visiting with us for the first time? If you could raise your hand, and we've got...
Thank you for participating in this morning's service. We also thank those who donate to support our message of unconditional love. We would love to hear from you by email, transform@unityrichmond.org. I affirm for you a week filled with God's blessings. And remember, God loves you, and so do I.